G'day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Relevate Defence Community Podcast. My name's James, and if you're new here, great, welcome. I'm one of the community leaders of the Relevate Defence community, and what we try to do here is give you out there the too long didn't read or the shortcut version of all of the mountains of information there is out there about how to get into, thrive in, and scale in the Australian defence industry. Because as you'd all know, there's a lot of complexity out there, which is why you've ended up here. So if it's the first time you're seeing this video, great. Subscribe to the channel. We're putting out videos regularly, and hit the notification bell so you can see when we upload new content. Today, we are talking about another great acronym that exists, as we all love them, within in the defence community, and that's JOSCAR. And if you haven't heard of that before, you're absolutely not alone, but the term is getting more and more popular as it's thrown around, as there's more and more adoption. But essentially, JOSCAR's a new system that's recently launched in Australia with the idea to make it easier for small to medium enterprise to enter and become a part of the defence ecosystem. I'm in no way an expert, and if you've seen me talk before, I speak a lot from experience, but we're very lucky today to be joined by Michelle Creevy. Michelle is a supply chain specialist, a supply chain expert, and an absolute thought leader in this space, and ever since I've known Michelle, she's had an absolute passion for helping small to medium businesses get in and play with the big fish. Welcome, Michelle. Can you introduce yourself and talk to us about what you got going on?
Yeah, hi James, thanks for the intro. So yeah, Michelle Creevy, I am the founder CEO of Purpose Procurement. Previously worked for Boeing Defence Australia for more than 11 years on their extended leadership for their supply chain. I help organisations unlock the potential of complex supply chains, leveraging Australian small to medium businesses to build resilient, future fit ecosystems, but also preparing SMEs to deliver in high stakes regulated environments.
Great. That's fantastic. And I think that's why you're here, to be the voice of reason and the voice of knowledge, because you've done some great things, and it's amazing to see you out with Purpose Procurement now to bring your influence and your knowledge to a wider audience. What the heck is JOSCAR?
JOSCAR, as an acronym, is the Joint Supply Chain Accreditation Register. Helios is the company from the UK that developed this platform, and it was launched in the UK, I think, around 6 or 7 years ago. And BAE Systems were actually one of the first defence primes to adopt it. Kinetic, Boeing, others were certainly founding signatories as well. So the point of JOSCAR is to create essentially a single trusted source of pre-qualified supplies for the defence ecosystem. There's a same or similar version in America called ExoStar, multi-decades old, and in real terms, or in actual terms, the database is a bit messy now. To put it lightly, the data integrity isn't good. That certainly wasn't going to be an option to go globally. And JOSCAR have taken on the challenge in a way that they've developed a platform that's far more real-time and agile and appropriate for the defence primes to access data. And that was not a very good response.
So in a nutshell, I guess it sounds like JOSCAR is trying to take all of the individual supplier registers and due diligence that's done at the prime level or at the subprime level and condense it into one trusted source, so that not only do the primes and the large suppliers have a single point of reference for the approved suppliers or trusted suppliers, but do you think it's making it easier for, or the intent is to make it easier for, the small to medium enterprises to enter into defence, given they always talk about, whenever we work with them, they always talk about the hoops they've got to jump through and the paperwork and the admin burden of all this. Is this going to make it easier, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, James. So the key factor of JOSCAR is that it's a single platform that the defence primes that have signed up to can have access to small to medium businesses and pre-qualify them. The difference here in Australia also is the Department of Defence have signed up, which is not what happened in the UK. It's only defence primes. When it was coming to Australia, CASG looked at the platform to assess the vulnerability and assess the appropriateness for the Australian industry. And in doing so, they decided they actually also wanted to adopt it. So it's very unique in that regard. So what it provides is the Department of Defence, or the Capability and Sustainment Acquisition Group, which is the procurement arm, and the defence primes that are signed up as members, access to pre-qualified small to medium businesses. And what happened was they went through a process, it was about a 12-month long process of looking at the questionnaire and making sure that questionnaire talked to the data and information that needed to be collected by defence primes to pre-qualify. So in completing the questionnaire, what it gives is the likes of BAE and Lockheed and Kinetic and Boeing a single point to have a look at or to search and filter by capability. So they're looking for CNC manufacturing as an example, and they want those companies to have AS9100D as a pre-qualification. They can go into that and they can search, and I'll give them the results of all companies across Australia with that. And they can continue to drill down by region, by volume, or size of organisation, other quality or certification and accreditations that are needed. That's the power from a defence prime perspective and a defence perspective. But from a small to medium business, all defence primes currently have different ways to register and different information they're looking for. So if you were going to go and register with each one individually, the amount of effort and time it would take and the amount of information you've got to input really is quite a burden for small businesses. It also doesn't necessarily give you the in that you think you're going to get, because the supply chain team members have got to constantly interrogate the information that's coming through their system, and they're not very good at it. And it's not pre-qualifying anyone is probably the big difference. Whereas JOSCAR, all those defence primes agreed that when a business registers and goes through the bouncing ball of all the registration, that it will have a pre-qualified status based on what they're looking for in accordance with the capabilities that you've got. So that's a lot of information, but essentially what that means is that pre-qualified piece is the differentiator, because no defence prime currently in their own supplier registration tool, typically, or I shouldn't say no, but it's not typical that it's a pre-qualification. So then when team members are looking at it, they're still not informed as to where you sit and what your scale or capability is, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, yeah. So what I'm hearing you say there is that even if small to medium enterprises do go to the effort and dedicate time to register with all these supply chains for Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed and the like, it still doesn't necessarily offer them the benefit that they may be seeing. So if you could distill it down to one or two key benefits from the SME perspective of going to JOSCAR, what would that be?
One database, one effort to register versus going into multiple. The other thing is they give you an electronic certificate once you're registered. And I actually think on LinkedIn that's fairly powerful, because you get this electronic certificate and you can load that up to your LinkedIn page and say, we are now pre-qualified and registered in the defence industry with JOSCAR. And that has a level of understanding right across all the defence primes as to what your capability, what your scale, etc. is. And I think that's the big thing about the second part. It's one database and one effort, but the second part of it as a benefit is JOSCAR, and that questionnaire was agreed upon by all the defence primes and the Department of Defence to be the baseline of information that's needed. So they all know what they're buying when you've registered and they look at your capabilities.
So it really is giving a set standard of information that is required and agreed on, so that they can compare apples with apples. Like you said, if they're looking for CNC manufacturers with AS9100D standard in this area with this level of capacity, great. Now they are JOSCAR certified. They've got that on their company page. They've got that on LinkedIn. Now they can really dive into the meatiness of going, okay, how do you see, or how would you respond to this request for quote or request for proposal, which I think is fantastic. Because I know one of the big challenges that I had in working in the bid and tender space is that when we're doing these supplier assessments or supply chain assessments for a large scale of work, the way that these different companies respond not only to the tender requirements or the questions we send them, but even how they communicate their level of certification and the elements that contribute to the due diligence that we would have to do from a prime perspective can vary. So I think that's great that JOSCAR is providing benefit not only to the individual, to the small to medium enterprise, but it's encouraging the primes to assess them on a level playing field, which I think is awesome for the industry. So in that, there with that as a benefit, I know we talk about a lot the risk and transparency in supply chains and the risk of supply chain diversification, the risk of not diversifying the supply chain. How does JOSCAR help organizations get a clearer picture to manage that risk on both sides of the coin, if you can speak to that?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest challenge is small to medium businesses just don't get visibility to primes. You can go to different networking events and forums and you can exchange business cards and you can do the pitch to the prime. The issue with that is those teams that are representing the defense primes are very busy. And I have been inside
Mm,
those walls, and I really can't I don't want people to underestimate how busy they are. They're not lazy, they're not wanting to to connect with industry. They are incredibly time poor and a lot of conflicting priorities within those organizations.
mm,
Whilst those forums are set up to have that great networking and they are designed and they absolutely want to achieve that, the issue is when they walk away and go back to their desk and go back to their office is a lot of that information can be lost. So for a
mm,
small to medium business to say we are registered and have a QR code on their business card or on their quad chart or something of that nature where that person can go back to their desk and go, I spoke to James. James got great capability. I think we can use James with this campaign that we're doing or the strategy we've got, and readily go to an approved and pre-qualified database that tells everything about James's company
mm.
is invaluable. The agility of that is invaluable. And a quad chart can only demonstrate so much or say so much. I think recognizing how time poor supply chain team members in Defence Primes and CASG are and how many
Mm,
approaches they get from small business. They can go to land forces for a week or Indo-Pac that's coming up, and they could have anywhere up to, and I have experienced between 100 to 300 business cards over the
mm,
course of a week as a team that go to those events. We might have a team of 4 or 6 people, and we'll come back, or we would have come back and returned with 40 to 50 business cards each. What's gonna tell us more about that company and what's gonna give us more real information about what their capabilities are and what they do is a tool or a platform such as JOSCAR and being able to use that as a follow-up.
absolutely. We've spoken about with the community before that there are a lot of things that we can do as small to medium enterprises that won't necessarily win us the work, but can remove a lot of those hurdles that would be easy to stumble on when, as you say, the supply chain or the bid team or the tender response team are so flat out busy. So what we're doing here, I love what you're saying, and we've done an episode previously that talks about quad charts. And for anyone who's seen that episode, great. If you haven't, go back through the playlist and have a look. You'll understand what a quad chart is and why it is important for you. When we talk about in that episode there about the quad chart is there's things you can highlight in there about what makes your business different or what can give the supply chain manager or the tender response manager assurance that you can do what you say or that you are at a certain level of certification or readiness to operate. Now, having JOSCAR registered or JOSCAR qualified in there would be a great way for small to medium enterprises to overcome one of those hurdles, because the quad chart isn't going to tell the whole story. But if that gets you some interest with the supply chain team and they can go immediately to something that they know and they trust and they recognize for more information, that's going to get you further down that pipeline than you would have if you just started showing up to these events and throwing business cards at people. Because as we all know, that just seems to be how people want to network. Throw things and see what sticks. So that's great. Is there anything else on the prime side or the large contractor side you can see as a benefit there too?
Their databases are typically not up to date because the
Right.
responsibility of the database and having the data up to date is the supplier or the company that's registered with them. A defence prime's not going to know when Michelle Creevy's business has now got a new site location unless Michelle Creevy tells them. The integrity of the data in JOSCAR, in particular because it is a new platform, is very exciting for defence and defence primes because they have real-time, up-to-date information on the companies that are
Mm.
registered. So that's also a caution for anyone who registers to make sure you put in your diary every 3 months, is my JOSCAR data up to date and true and correct? And if that
Mm.
pops up in your diary and it is, you go, great, nothing to do. If when that pops up in your diary, you go, oh, we've actually gone from 18 members to 15, which means we're no longer a micro business. And we've now got another site, or we've won more business, or we've got an accreditation or a certification that, in the last period. It's your responsibility to get in and update that data and make sure it is all up to date. So while it's new and it's in its first year, absolutely defence primes, I would imagine, and defence would be quite excited about that, the integrity of the data, but it is the responsibility of any company that's registered to
Mm.
make sure you maintain that.
Absolutely. We talk about that all the time with the community, is that there's definitely no handouts in defense industry. There's rarely handouts in business in general, but the onus sits with the business owner or the teams and the companies to keep their data up to date and put themselves forward as a viable option, because no one's going to come in there and drag you through unless you're ready for that. So with the kind of the interest from CASG, from the defence primes, is JOSCAR a requirement going forward, either a specified requirement or even as a, hey, we're probably not going to look at anyone from who's not registered on JOSCAR?
I wouldn't imagine so, because JOSCAR does come at a cost. Defence and defence primes can't say that's the only way we're going to accept your information. But what I will say is, and it is going to take a shift, what buyers have to do is they have to shift their buying behaviour. And what I mean by that is when they're
Mm.
about to go out to market and they're doing research, they've got to get in the habit of going in a JOSCAR and actually doing that search and looking into the companies that they get a result on. And that is a shift. They're currently used to using their own database. They're currently used to being in meetings and asking technical leads, who have you used
Mm.
before? Who do you know? Lord Google, as I call it, is still used. But what will happen, and what I would imagine is happening with JOSCAR, is again coming back to that pre-qualified position and the fact that the questionnaire was agreed by defence and defence primes. So that is all the data that they're looking for. And it expands, right? So you say, I
Mm.
do something, and the questions unfold specifically to that capability. So it's at discrete capability
Mm.
levels that they're getting that pre-qualification. So whilst the buying behaviour has to change, what you will see is defence and defence primes will end up over time, and I would imagine to be again probably the next 6 to 12 months, it'll start to really unfold. What they will end up with is a list of companies that should be brought into an approach to market that will give them the best result. And when they start seeing the
Mm.
better results, having interrogated something like JOSCAR and getting more qualified companies into the mix, when they see the result of that, will then steer them in a more consistent way to JOSCAR. And I would imagine in the next 3 to 5 years, it will become the source of truth.
Yeah, so really it's a new capability now. There is heavy investment in it. There's a lot of interest in it. And while not a requirement, if the value is demonstrated, because with JOSCAR and Helios as being a dedicated capability, a dedicated team to maintain that quality database, if we fast forward a couple of years, then what would you hope is the benefit to small to medium enterprise, but to defence industry in general?
Yeah, I think to answer the first part of that question, James, as a small business, you lean into something, and if you don't get a return, you tend to go, it's broken or it's not right for me, so I'm going to walk away from it. I think the challenge with JOSCAR
Mm.
is in getting registered, you need to make a commitment for a 3-year registration at a minimum.
Yep.
Yes, there's a cost in the first year, and if you don't get a return, you're likely to feel that it wasn't right for you, and you drop that cost from your business. But this is about the long haul. So we always say getting into defence is a marathon, and I think things like JOSCAR are what I call the half marathon. Defence will never be a sprint. So if you think registering with JOSCAR in the first year and getting nothing from it meant that it wasn't right for you, you're not looking at it. You're not taking the right lens. This is about the half marathon, right? So you'll never get more exposure to a defence prime once their buyers start really utilising this tool, or defence start really utilising this tool. And as I said, it's going to take a shift. This is turning a very complex beast around to look at industry in a different way and search for capability in a different way. So it's in its first year. We need to cut it some slack as such. So maintaining your, like, going through the registration process and committing for at least 3 years would be what I would say a small business needs to commit to, and being very loud and proud about being registered, because defence
Right.
primes, they are invested in this. They have to pay membership. It's not free for them. So small to medium businesses are paying, but I can tell you we're talking 5 figures plus that defence and defence primes pay per annum. Plus, they've invested up front to co-design the solution for Australia. So they're
Mhm.
heavily invested. It's not going away. It's going to get better. It's going to become the source of truth. So everyone's got to be in it for the long haul. If after 3 years you don't get any success, it may not be right for you. What you're selling may not be bought as heavily as what you think, and they may not be searching in a
Mhm.
platform like JOSCAR, and you might have to be more reliant on personal relationships. Absolutely, there's going to be a tipping point that you're going to decide whether it's right for you and your business, but
Mhm.
really taking that 3-year reflection of we're in it for more than 1 year is the way to approach it.
I really like that, and been my experience as well that even some early success with some early interest in defense industry with these big companies, we don't play this game to have the one-off contract. We don't play this game to have the one-off acquisition. We play this game because for a sustainable Australian industrial base and a sustainable Australian defence supply chain, there needs to be growth, there needs to be investment, and there needs to be long-term incumbency. And it can be really hard, as I know, as a small business owner, to look too close of a horizon before you can even really say, did this work or did this not? And while JOSCAR may not be the right tool for everyone or the right platform for everyone, it's going to, I think from what you've said, it's going to give you maximize your opportunity to be seen by the right people at the right level so that you can have those right conversations to discuss how you and defense suppliers and CASG and all of us in the ecosystem can work together.
And I'll add to
So
that,
in,
at the right time,
go please.
at the right
Yes.
time. If you've got quite discrete capabilities and services, goods or services that you're supplying, then they're not going to be bought every day. But when they buy them, they're
Mm,
intentionally going to industry. And typically, I've seen that they're in long term sustainment programs. It's a problem that needs to be solved and something that needs to be delivered that a defence prime is intentionally going to market for. That's the other reason why I encourage small businesses to think longer than the first year's registration, because depending on the ecosystem and the cycle of defence programs, in the first year, they just may not be buying what you're selling. But when they
mm,
are, especially if you've got a discrete capability, goods or services, when they are, they don't trust a Lord Google search because
mm,
it can give them a lot of rubbish. And often they won't know where to buy it. And a classic example was, I won't mention the program because it was a classified program, but a sought after capability was isotactic hot processing. And the Australian Industry Capability Team, we did a search on that, and we went to Otis and Defence Jobs Queensland, etc. Ended up finding out no one in Australia did it. But that was a
mm.
sought after capability for quite a critical program. So something like JOSCAR actually can help defence or defence primes drill down to some of those really discrete things that you wouldn't otherwise find capability for, and that you certainly wouldn't trust a Google search on. Whereas if you're pre-qualified and accredited through JOSCAR anything that feels same or similar to what they're looking for in a really discreet level, they're going to go, we're going to have a conversation with them. We're going to see where they can do what we want. And again, coming back to those forums and the networking events, while they're great, what I discovered and I knew to be true was you would meet a company and you go, wow, they've got great capabilities. We absolutely know they're going to be great for the Boeing supply chain. But because you're not buying it now and you don't have an immediate need, fast forward 6, 8, 10 months later, you're sitting in a meeting going, who's that company I met? Who did I talk
Mm,
to at Land Forces? There was someone I know who did that. And it can be really difficult to go back through your own information to recall and reconnect with that company. So again, that JOSCAR certification, etc., I would imagine would empower those buyers or those internal teams to go, I met someone at Land Forces, they did a particular thing. I know they were JOSCAR accredited, and potentially, I'm not saying that they necessarily would find you, but there's a higher potential that they will get into JOSCAR and identify you. Or if you've sent them your link, they do a simple search in email, like
mm,
JOSCAR registered. And if you've got that in your subject line or in your email, it'll come up. And it sounds
mm.
really dumb, but in those organizations that have hundreds of SMEs throughout the course of the year approaching them, those key search words in their email or on a quad chart or whatever information you give them can actually prove to be invaluable when they need to recall you, which is a very difficult thing.
Absolutely. These sales cycles that we deal with are so long that
Yep.
you might not get it today, tomorrow, next year, but you want to be there and you want to be pre-qualified and ready to go when they do come knocking, because they, in my experience, they generally need something pretty quickly. And JOSCAR sounds like a good tool to be able to allow small to medium enterprise to stay front of mind or be readily contactable. So
Yep.
finishing up on JOSCAR, it really does sound like it's going to be a growth area for defence industry as we move forward over the next 2, 3, 5 years. And I'd encourage people to consider whether it's right for you. It may be, it may not be, but don't
Yep.
just discount it because it looks complex. Don't just discount it because you've heard us say here that it might not happen for 3 years. Consider whether it's right for you. And if you would like to learn more about how we can work together to benefit each other in the defence community, consider going to the link below and coming along to one of our meetings. We run monthly catch-ups, lunchtime catch-ups, where we can all talk about the trending issues in defence industry. This is not a sales networking type of community. This is people helping people, because as we know, the only way to get into defence industry is to know how to get there. And we're all working together to get there. So check out defence.relevate.com.au and send us an inquiry. We'd love to have you along to an event and follow along for this podcast for more handy information. Thanks to Michelle for coming along today. It's been awesome to chat to you, a real expert in the industry. Before we head off, is there anything else you'd like to say to the defence community out there?
Look, James, obviously, I think Relevate's a great community. Anything that brings people together to share information and lessons learned is amazing. Yeah, encourage everyone to look into the community and come along. But these conversations are really about do now, do later, or do never. For JOSCAR, have a look at it, do your research, decide whether it's something that is right for you now, decide whether you want to park it and come back to it next year to look at it again, or whether you feel it's not right for you. As you said, this is not a sales pitch. But what I will say about JOSCAR is the evidence in the UK has shown that it has absolutely been an enabler for industry to get visibility and connections with defence primes and to enter complex supply chains. So it's got a proven track record in the UK, Europe market, and it will achieve that in Australia. But for small businesses, as I said, it's a do now, do later, or maybe do never. But worth checking it out and keeping an eye on it.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Michelle. And thank you everyone for out there for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Right. Thanks.